us pray. Most gracious and merciful Father, Lord God, we come very humbly first to say thank you. Lord God, you woke us up this morning, touched us with a finger of love. Now we ask that you would bless this event, bless us to hear, bless those that are on the way. And Lord God, please make our work that will be pleasing unto you and do something to benefit the community. In God's name we pray, amen.
Good morning, everyone. We are very happy. New Jersey Black Issues is very happy to have all of you here, as well as virtually. We are doing the legislative conference this year in person with a number of panelists, as well as visitors that are here. And we're also doing it on Zoom. So thank you so very much. My name is Reva Foster. I'm fortunately the chair of New Jersey Black Issues, and we're very, very happy to have you here. I want to first thank the president of Thomas Edison State University, Dr. Hancock, for coming earlier to welcome us to her facility, as well as I would like to thank our program committee who has dedicated themselves to putting on these various programs for you, conferences, seminars throughout the year. And we want to make sure that you enjoy and get information that is helpful to you as we move forward today. I would like to also say that New Jersey Black Issues would not be here without Honorable Donald Kofi Tucker. Donald Tucker was the one who started the conventions and started New Jersey Black Issues, along with the Walter Fauntleroy, who wrote the legislative information that we needed to follow. And we're still following it. And that's why I say I'm very fortunate to still be the chair. And our executive committees, members, we have a number of them here today. We have our treasurer here. We have our first vice president here. And we have our vice president. He's looking at me now. He's saying, say my name, say my name, say my name. His name is, I was going to say doctor, but he's Reverend Ronald Tuff, and John Smith, who is our treasurer and our president, and sometimes thinks he's the president of our chair of the program committee that dedicated themselves to making sure that this was being done virtually, and that is George Gore. Now, without further ado, I would like for you to be informed as well as being engaged, and we hope we set a spark in all of the people that are looking at our Zoom. And what is that spark for? That spark is for you to go out in your communities, to go out in your churches, to go out in your various organizations and inform them about what you learned today at Thomas Edison State University, that New Jersey Black Issues had the legislative caucus. So we would like for you to start it now with our first panelist. It is my pleasure to introduce the first panelist that we have for today, Ms. Zahiya Ellis. Hardworking. She is everywhere. We see her on Zoom, and today we have her here in person. She wanted to come so she could deliver the message to you personally. And the panel that she will be talking about first is the infrastructure investment and jobs, what it means to New Jersey. From the governor's office, Ms. Zahiya Ellis.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to the entire committee. I really appreciate the invitation to be able to be here in person today. I was with you all before on Zoom, and so I'm glad to be able to be here both virtually and in person for those who could make it. I want to tell you about the IEJA, as it's known in our little circle, but also about a couple of other policies and programs we have in place that will help Black New Jerseyans. And I'm going to get into some pretty nitty-gritty details, and you don't have to worry about writing them all down. My office can follow up in writing with any numbers or facts and figures that I share with you if you don't get it all just in my presentation today. But before I do that, I do want to share a bit about me on a personal level. I'm originally from Atlanta, and I made my way to New Jersey by way of DC to serve first as Governor Murphy's Secretary of Higher Education. And I left that job in July of 2020 during what we thought at the time was the height of COVID, but we didn't know what was to come, to serve in the role that I am in now, and that is the Chief Policy Advisor to the Governor. In this job, I have about 15 policy professionals on my team who work on everything from transportation and infrastructure to healthcare, childcare, education, housing, clean energy, which I see is another topic here. There are also 4 offices that sit within our shop. One is the cabinet secretary and her team, who interacts with the individual cabinet members across the government. The Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, which is led by Janae Johnson, who joined us recently and has been fantastic. The Office of Healthcare, Affordability, and Transparency, and the Office of Climate Change and the Green Economy. So all of that is within the policy team in the governor's office. And we work with the folks in our communications shop, our legislative affairs, and our outreach teams to advance the holistic policy agenda. I want to share that structure with you because sometimes people kind of wonder, how does this all work? Where do you sit as it relates to the governor? I know somebody else, kind of where are they? So that's a bit about the structure that is the team that I lead. And I do want to tell you a bit about the team, and I'll share why in a minute. Every single person, and I hired most of them, individually interviewed them, asked them why they were passionate about this work, why they wanted to do this work. Every single one of them, I can tell you, does this because they are really committed to equity and justice. Each of them, to a person, has like a really personal story about why they got into this work. I know I'm an education nerd. That's how I got into this. And so I, think about education as being fundamental to people being able to live a healthy life. And sometimes it can be hard for me to connect with some of the other areas. So transportation, for instance, which is a big part of what I want to talk to you. I said, well, the person who handles that, why are you interested in transportation? And he had such a really great, compelling story about what it meant for him and his family to be able to use public transportation, to be able to get to school, to work. And he wanted to make sure that those opportunities and that infrastructure was available, because if you are locked at home, you're unable to go to work, you're unable to get to school, you're unable to see family and friends. And that really touched me. And I think about that, that these people aren't just some faceless bureaucrats doing this job. They are really people who are committed to all of the different areas. So, and I also would say the team is pretty diverse, and I think representation matters. Personnel is policy. So I'm also sharing a bit about the people so that you know that the people that are there care about the work, and there are people that you can work with. And I'm also sharing this because earlier this week, I announced that I'm going to be leaving the governor's office in July to move back to my hometown of Atlanta. After 4.5 years, it's just time. And so I want you all to know that I'm leaving the work in good hands, and that those are the people that you can connect with even after I'm gone, to advance any of your goals as well. And I think we have many shared goals. So on to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. IEJA, as it's known in our little office, and I will use that acronym IIJA instead of saying the whole thing out. It's a really important piece of legislation. I think probably the Biden administration would say it's the crowning piece of what they've done thus far for, just in terms of their priorities with Congress. We are working from a strong foundation on IEJA, though. And so before I get into, and I promise I am going to get into the details of it, I want to just share about a couple of other investments that we have made in various areas that I think are important to the Black community in New Jersey. One is in affordable housing. This year, we committed $300 million to affordable housing, and particularly to help people in to afford homes in communities where they have been shut out. These are the homes in communities that are part of the Mount Laurel settlements, which is unique to New Jersey. And this would completely get us down the project list for all the known projects right now. So this is pretty significant. It would really transform a lot of places and enable more people to be able to live in communities across New Jersey. And I would note communities that have been very segregated because they lack affordable housing in particular. So this is a big deal for not only housing affordability, but for other priorities just from across the state. The second that I want to just mention, this kind of went under the radar, but we proposed $350 million to be invested for direct aid to the Schools Development Authority, which constructs new schools as part of the what used to be known as the Abbott districts. These are districts that disproportionately serve Black students. And so this is $350 million of new schools that would go to kind of modernize that. We put in that request through the American Rescue Plan funding to the legislature, and we're waiting to hear back on that. But that is something that I want folks to be aware of because it can kind of go under the radar. And then there just, I could go on a long list and I won't do that right now on things that aren't IEJA, but I do want people to be aware of these different pots of funding because I don't know always that this happens. We pass these budgets, they're massive, they have so many things in them. And so knowing just for you all's purposes, you know, some of the things, if you wanted to follow up with us and say, where is that money? Where is this? Where's the application? We can find that for you. We have a minority male teacher initiative that's been going on for several years now. We have vocational programming that we put in money for in the last budget for individuals who are incarcerated so that when they are incarcerated, they are not just there, they're learning new skills, and new money for people who are incarcerated to have that kind of skill building is something that is novel. So we're excited about that. And then the last thing on this front that I will mention is that in higher education, which is obviously an area I care a lot about, when I was secretary, and we started this back in 2018, 2019, that timeframe, we developed a new funding model for our colleges and universities for any new money that's going to colleges and universities that's based on metrics of service to students of color. And I know a lot of funding models across the state, and oftentimes we say, well, we're giving it out based on income, which is going to help Black people. This one actually looks at how many Black students graduated, and you get more money for the college if you are doing better in terms of your graduation among Black students, in terms of your enrollment among Black students. So that's just something, again, these things can go under the radar, it can get lost in the whole budget, but that's a fairly significant deal. There are not many states that have the courage to say that it matters that you graduate Black students from college. So I just want folks to know that we are building on a strong foundation when it comes to the money coming in for IEJA. The funds are gonna help us build on a lot of the work that we already have. And the team that's working on IEJA includes the director of our Office of Equity, Janae Johnson, that I mentioned. So it's our transportation and infrastructure advisor, whose name is Richard Sun. He's the young man who I mentioned is really passionate about transportation and infrastructure and what that can mean for communities. But he is designated as our IEJA infrastructure coordinator. So if you're looking for who do I go to in the governor's office, Richard is your point person, but also there's a team of others, including Janae, who is a member of that team and trying to make sure that we're connecting to other places and ensuring equity in all of the investments. So this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. As I mentioned, it was an achievement of the Biden administration, and it really was something that they have been trying to do in Congress for a long time to make investments in failing infrastructure across the country. President after president talks about infrastructure, trains, roads, and this was, finally something that they were able to get done on a bipartisan basis. I would note it is both an infrastructure and jobs act, so it's not just about building these things for the sake of building them, but it is designed to create thousands of new jobs across various modes of infrastructure. And by improving, so not only do the creation of the roads, bridges, et cetera, create jobs. But by improving that infrastructure, we are thereby making more jobs accessible to New Jerseyans who don't currently have easy access to them. We are set to receive $14.2 billion in formula funding over the next 5 years from IEJA. The programs in this bill are administered by some 14 different federal agencies. And we hope that these are going to lead to not just kind of small tweaks, but really transformative investments across the state. So we're looking to try to figure out how to knit these together, because $14.2 billion is quite significant. And we want to be able to say 5 years from now, we can see the proceeds of what that money led to. We don't want it to just be like, oh, that went a little bit here and a little bit there. The programs in this bill, the funding will contribute to repair and transportation infrastructure, expanding transit, hardening our energy resilience, replacing unhealthy water infrastructure, and it will guarantee broadband access across the state. And I will talk a little bit about each of the areas in just a second. It will allow us to equitably repair, not just do new infrastructure, but also repair failing infrastructure across the state. And we want to use the funds to create good paying union jobs when we do this. So it's going to create jobs because people need to be working on these projects, but they need to be good jobs. They need to have protections for folks. And we're committed to that. And the other thing that I want to mention just about how we just deploy these funds, we are looking at how we focus on historically disadvantaged communities in distributing the money. So that is $14.2 billion that is going to be distributed with an eye toward communities that haven't had access typically. So I'm going to go through the couple of components of IEJA that I mentioned: broadband, workforce development, transportation and transit infrastructure, water, and then climate resilience. And again, I'll share some facts and figures, but you can follow up with my office if you want all of this, just share with you so you can distribute. In terms of broadband, some have compared this to the 21st century version of President Roosevelt's Rural Electrification Act. I mean, it's that big of a deal. It will help all families across the state afford, access, and adopt high-speed internet. So, New Jersey is not Iowa or, one of these other plain states that people are, really not connected. But New Jersey has 97% of New Jerseyans do have access to high-speed internet, but we know that 3% is still looking at communities that are like the ones that we all serve. And the digital divide definitely still exists in terms of how you get access to that. Even if you're in a place that technically has access, can you afford it? Are there other barriers to you getting it, even if the service technically covers your neighborhood? So we are expecting to receive $400 million from the BEAD program, and $50 million we expect to receive from the digital equity program. And we're going to use that to close that digital divide for our broadband needs. I think as it relates to broadband, I'll just say the last couple of years have really demonstrated that internet is a necessity for working remotely, going to school remotely. And when we bring that broadband access, we are helping people and enabling folks who may not have had the ability to effectively work remotely to be able to do that. We are also going to be encouraging participation in the White House's Affordable Connectivity Program, which helps everybody afford high-speed internet. I'm going to move on to workforce development. I mentioned this is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So we've got to really focus on the workforce development component to meet our goals of delivering on this investment while creating good paying union jobs. The focus on expanding the union workforce is really about expanding to communities that have long been ignored by local unions, i.e. Black folks. So we want to think about how to strengthen the unions while also strengthening the economic health of the state and ensure that they are requiring access and doing more to engage communities of color, Black communities in those unions. One of the things that has gone a long way to this is I have to give credit to our Commissioner of Labor, who is really tried to diversify our apprenticeships, which can be a foothold into some of those good jobs. I don't have these statistics in front of me, but he has expanded the number of paid apprenticeships significantly. I think he's more than doubled the number of women that are in apprenticeships. He has had significant increases in the percentage of those apprenticeships that are held by Black and Latino individuals. So you can get the specifics from him, but I can tell you that the apprenticeship world looks very different because of the work that we've been doing in this administration, and I'm very proud of that. Ways that you ensure good jobs are part of these infrastructure investments are by requiring local hire agreements, prevailing wage requirements, and more funding for apprenticeship programs. So those are the things that we will be doing to integrate into the IEJA funds to make sure that they are equitably getting the jobs out there. And I would add that once we start these projects, it would be good to connect with you all to make sure that people know here's where they're hiring, here's where there are apprenticeships available, because so much of this is about just the knowledge of what's available. Going to move on to what many people think of when they think of infrastructure, which is the transportation and transit infrastructure. And that is the lion's share of the IEJA funding. We are going to be receiving roughly $12 billion to invest in our transportation infrastructure, which will make our roads safer, expand transit access, and replace failing bridges. It will allow us to complete the critical gateway project that you may have heard so much about. It's going to modernize our centuries-old connection between New York and New Jersey. That's what Gateway would do. And so many folks, especially in the northern part of our state, rely on that really crumbling infrastructure to get in and out of their work. And so we know that it's really important to our region as a whole to get that done. There's another aspect of this, which is a carbon reduction program, which will give us $150 million to cut down on our transportation emissions. For those folks that live in communities that have been cut across by highways or who live near major routes, this is huge, just for quality of life and every day. It's also going to help us advance our environmental justice goals while reaching our own state 2050 emissions targets. We're also going to receive $100 million to expand electric vehicle charging across the state. So if we think about the future, and I can't remember if it was a Super Bowl or something, every commercial for a car was about an electric vehicle. So that's where it's moving. We're moving there. It's slower than maybe we should be, but we're getting there. But part of that is you can't have an electric car if you don't have somewhere to charge it. And so we're really looking at expanding access to charging all across the state. So that charging infrastructure is critical. The Safe Streets, Roads, and Roads for All grant program is going to help us combat traffic safety incidents, which have been, I don't want to say on the rise, but there have been a number of frustrating and challenging reports about pedestrian injury and just traffic safety in general. And so this will allow us to create and implement street safety plans across the state. And then there are some competitive grants that we are we're going to apply for every competitive grant that we think we can get. So that's one thing. So we can't say for sure what that will be. But one of them we wanted to highlight is the RAISE grants, RAISE, which will fund innovative programs in the state that will increase equitable transportation access. So in terms of, making sure that the communities that haven't had access to transportation do get that, and that it's affordable for them. Those grants would help us do that if we're able to win them. Going to move on to water and then climate, and then see if there are any questions. IEJA will double the funding we receive through our state revolving funds for safe drinking water. And so that is really just important. The past, decade or so, we've just heard a lot about lead pipes and safe water. Our wastewater treatment systems haven't been invested in the way that they should be in all communities, which is really tragic and leads to terrible outcomes, especially for children. So we are receiving almost $250 million for lead service line replacement alone. That's going to really help us in that respect. And we're already doing work that we've done with state funds that we've announced previously through our Department of Environmental Protection. And we have a comprehensive statewide plan on this. A minimum of 49% of that funding will be spent as no match grants for communities or fully forgivable loans. So a lot of times, if you don't have access to credit as a community, you're cut out of some of these investments in infrastructure in particular. And this will allow us to really get to some of the communities that have been historically excluded from taking advantage of that program in particular. The last thing on my list, not last, but certainly not least in terms of importance, is climate and resilience. This is going to improve and expand the LIHEAP program, which many of you should be familiar with, but it's the low income home energy assistance program, and then the weatherization assistance program. Those are run through our Department of Community Affairs, which is led by our fantastic Lieutenant Governor, Sheila Oliver. And that will help to manage energy costs for low income families, prepare for emergencies, et cetera. And then the IEJA is going to help us reach the climate goals that we have set for 2030 and 2050. As sustainability runs throughout the entire bill in terms of how it's structured. Almost every discretionary grant program in the bill will only be funded when it decreases carbon emissions as a project. So that is a fundamental piece of this. The BPU, DEP, and EDA are pursuing some of those competitive discretionary grant opportunities. Like I said, we are going to be going after every grant that we can as part of this IEJA funding, and those are the critical agencies that are going to be working together on that. So as you can see from the list that I just went through, there is a lot here. There's a lot here that could truly transform the state, from both the physical improvements to daily life, quality of life improvements that would occur if we were able to fully implement this in the way that we envision. To the jobs that will be created from all of that investment. We know that this is going to outlast the funding for the future. I mean, this is going to be something that decades and generations from now, we're going to be able to see the ramifications of in a positive way. We are working to put together a public platform for everybody to be able to see kind of when we get grants, where they are, the names of all of these different programs, just so that there's some transparency into what's going on. You don't have to pull me to the side or know who to email in the governor's office. I want you all to have that and know that, but we also want to be able to say, hey, go to nj.gov/IEJA and here's the progress and all that stuff. So that is coming very soon. And then for the things that are discretionary, where we have some ability to shape how the programs are, we don't, even though I think I have a fantastic team, we don't want to do this work in our little bubble on State Street. We want to get input from the community. So we will be developing opportunities for us to get input on how we give out this money, on how these grants are structured and how the communities are engaged. So look forward to that as well. We're just getting started on this in terms of, we just got the bill passed not long ago. I want to mention two particular contacts though for you. I mentioned them earlier, but Richard Sun is our IEJA coordinator for the state. He is the transportation and infrastructure policy advisor on our team. And then Janae Johnson is the director of our Office of Equity. And the two of them are really the point people on our team who have been working on IEJA and can get you any answer. They know more about this than I do. They help me find all the information for these remarks today. So that is all that I have for today. I really thank you again for having me here. For those of you that are watching virtually, please don't hesitate to reach out to us through NJ Black History Convention, and we will certainly remain in touch even with the office after I'm gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for your presentation. And I know a number of us are a little bit taken back realizing that you have so much funding, dollars to work with on all these initiatives, and that New Jersey is taking the lead among the United States of doing this with a strong foundation with you working on this project. And we really appreciate all the work that you do. Can we convince you to stay? No.
I can stay for 5 minutes to take questions, but we got our plane tickets booked. We're going.
Okay, but you've done such a wonderful job in terms of outlining the equities that is necessary for all of our people who have been left unattended to, and that we are looking forward to following the information that you have discussed in terms of making that available on the websites so we can go and see the progress of these billions and billions and millions of dollars being allocated to those services that you plan to make sure that they impact our Black communities. And thank you so much. And we love you.
Two questions in reference to specifically, how is the governor's office involved in the infrastructure money for University Hospital Newark? And also the legislation that's pending, and how is the governor's office also involved in implementing the CCRB legislation? Those two questions.
Yep.
I think they're very important.
Sure. So with University Hospital, we have been in touch with the interim CEO and have been hearing their plans for how they're planning to move forward on that. I think we're really eager to make sure that we have a world-class research institution that is also not neglecting, as the only public hospital in New Jersey, not neglecting the needs of the community. That's a very key part of what we need to have moving forward. So we believe that you can have, I know what they want is a world-class research institution. It's in Newark, incredibly important that it's still serving the Newark community. And so what we're doing right now is just working together, but we're committed to making sure that they have what they need. We don't have a specific, dollar figure, whatever yet, but I'm sure that we'll come to that. And then the CCRB legislation, I'm not supposed to talk about pending legislation, but the governor has been supportive of this concept. So I can say that.
Okay.
It's an exception that he made on this one.
Thank you very much.
And there's a question that is put in remotely from Mr. James E. Harris. It says, does the department have a list of Black churches in New Jersey? I guess with the understanding that this information really needs to get to our Black churches as well.
Let me, I'm sure our outreach team has a list. I don't want to say it's comprehensive because I know how it can be with churches, but I know they do have a list. And if there are people that are not on that list, we're happy to send this information to them.
And we would like to get it for New Jersey Black Issues as well as for Mr. Harris, who's in education.
Yes.
And that way we can check with our communities. And all of you here that are listening, we can make sure that everyone who is asked to be a part of this legislative conference today can receive it as well. And we'd love to get you to update information that needs to be included in there from your organizations and communities. And we'll make sure that a final list is put together. And we have that agreement with Zahiya Ellis.
Yes.
Thank you. The state will be doing that. Thank you so very much. And there's another question here along that same line. James Harris put the question in is, what are the incentives to create a willingness of the unions to admit more Blacks? And the apprenticeship program is one way I see that you have already mentioned that, but also on-the-job training.
Yes.
That's critical to be able to say for companies that have already signed contracts that a part of the contract was that you would make sure that people of color could have on-the-job training.
Yes, and this is a good question. I think the pieces about the union, things have changed in a, not fortunate ways for the labor movement because of some court rulings and things like that. So they're having more trouble getting members.
Yes.
So if you are qualified for the job, the way it works now is you have the qualifications. The union is not the barrier entry to the job. If you're qualified, you get hired, you can join the union as part of the job, which then gives you benefits. Okay. So we're not in the days where you kind of have to go, necessarily through in order, and they can discriminate on basis of other things. It's like you're part of the job. The job is a union job that if you pay dues, you get those benefits.
Thank you so very much. And we're hoping that you're still here to make sure a lot of these big hurdles are overcome and that we get the progress that you're talking about and the governor wants. So thank you so much. If there's not another question, I will say thank you and give her a round of applause from the governor's office. Thank you very much.